jingle bells, jingle all the way. Oh, what fun it is to ride in a strange and deadly sleigh. Hey! Welcome to the Strange and Deadly Show, brought to you by Gentleman's Grindhouse Records. On this show, we discuss films on the Section 3 list related to the video Nasties. I told Tom I wasn't going to be annoying before we started recording. Changed my mind. We pair up our films every fortnight based on a theme. You can find out more information about all of our podcasts over at gentlemansgrindhouserecords.com and subscribe on iTunes via any podcatcher you might be using. And we'll give you that information again and also tell you how you can get your feedback and comments over to us at the end of the show. Well, Merry Christmas, everybody. We're actually recording this show just before Christmas, unlike Jules Holland, who records that bloody hootenanny in October, Tom. Bloody cheating piano playing git.
Yeah. Well, no such messing about here, mate. When we do a Christmas show, we do a Christmas show.
We do, and we do it properly, and we ensure that we stick with the theme by talking about two films that have nothing to do with Christmas whatsoever. But look, we hope you're having a good time, folks. We hope you've got all your Christmas shopping done and everything. But look now, relax. You need to listen to us. We're the final Christmas present, really. Really, we're the only Christmas present you need, I think. But I happen to think very highly of us, of course. Massive ego. Tom, how have you been lately, my friend?
I've been okay. I've been good. You know, just trying to get everything together as usual for this time of year. It seems to have crept up a bit this time, but that's probably because 90% of my life was playing Fallout 4. But I've finished that now, so I can do other things. So, you know, which I will, I'm sure, well, something I'll be doing later on, but we'll talk about that in a sec, I think. How are you doing?
Yeah, not too bad at all. How many hours did you end up clocking in Fallout 4? Do you have a sort of estimate of that, or did you look at it in
I'm not sure.
I'm sure it shows you in the stats.
Yeah, it'll be on there somewhere, won't it? But I don't know. But yeah, I got onto a certain mission that seemed to be like, okay, this is the end. This is towards the goal. And I thought, you know what? I've had a good play of this. And to be honest, once you complete it, you can carry on playing anyway. You can do you know any missions that aren't the main mission based. So you know, I do pop on and carry on and take care of my little settlements and so on. So you know, there's still a bit of mileage in it, and like you say, the DLC one day when that comes,
yeah, you'll be back, Tom. They've got their fingernails in you. You're not going anywhere. But Tom, Fallout 4, of course, was hugely hyped, and lots of people were talking about that pretty much non-stop in the gaming world. But at the moment, the planet is aflame with hype about a certain low-budget independent movie called Star Wars: The Force Awakens. And it's an interesting thing, Tom, because you sort of asked me the other day in a message. You were telling me about a Force Awakens steelbook that Xavi have got up there. Of course, Xavi never one to let the steelbook lie. They have to get in on the game as quickly as possible and charge 25 quid for him. But you linked me up to the Force Awakens steelbook, and of course I probably went up there and bought it. But you asked me a question. You said you sort of... You didn't really know if I was a Star Wars fan or not, and I guess we'd never really spoken about it before. But I'm a huge Star Wars fan and have been since I was a kid. Yeah. What's it been like for you? I would imagine you much the same.
I think so, and you're right. It's funny. I know you like horror films. I know the kind of horror films you like. We share a lot of the same taste in a lot of ways, and we both love the superhero stuff. But we've never talked about Star Wars, and I think for me, it's because I loved them when I was a kid. Grew up, and you know, people seem to make a bit of a career of prequel bashing, but it's not so much for me that they enraged me. It was more that I just didn't really connect with them at all. So it was just kind of like, well, if this is Star Wars now, and at that time we didn't think there was going to be any more films. It was like, well, if this is it, then it kind of killed my passion for it, really. But The Force Awakens seemed to have awakened it, Chris.
Very good. Giving you a little bit of applause there. Hopefully it doesn't sound too loud on the mic. You're absolutely right, Tom. It seems like this is... Now, first of all, just in case you guys are worried out there, are they going to spoil anything? Neither of us have seen the movie yet. Tom, you're going to go and see it tonight,
I am,
aren't you?
yeah.
Yeah, so on the Sunday that we're recording this, the 20th of December. is when we're recording this. In the daytime, actually, at 12:30 during the day, which is kind of unusual for us. So I've got daylight streaming in. It's very nice. I'm going to go and see the film on the 31st of December. I've got my tickets booked. I never go and see a film when it first comes out. I always, sort of wait a few weeks, let things settle down. I go and see it in the morning, so I haven't got to deal with as many people. Don't like people, Tom.
No, me neither.
Not a fan of people.
Give me an empty cinema any day.
Absolutely. I'll tell you what, if I was rich, people talk about, I'd give a lot of money to charity and I would rent out my own theatre for the day so that it could just be me sitting there. But no, you're absolutely right. It really does seem like The Force Awakens has sort of revived Star Wars. A lot of people are saying that this is very much a true sequel to the original trilogy. The prequels when I was younger, I was enraged by. I've since come to recognise that they're basically flaws from an egomaniac, which is, Mr. George Lucas. Essentially, somebody, people couldn't say no to him, and that's why you got what you got. And I think this having a new creative team, having J.J. Abrams on board, who sort of auditioned for the films via the Star Trek reboot that he directed and the follow-up Into Darkness, and it seems to have done his, a lot of studying of the original trilogy, because there's even from the trailers, Tom, I think you could see that it's got a real sort of air of authenticity about it. It looks much more real. It doesn't just look like a bunch of actors against a green screen.
Definitely. It's I really do hope for the best, because I know a lot of people moan about shared universes these days because everyone's trying to jump on it, but I mean, I love the Marvel one. Hopefully, I love the DC one when that comes along. But I think the potential for a Star Wars, anthology stories coming off it, and this, that, and the other, I think it's quite an interesting concept, and I'm prepared to run with it for a while and see how it goes, and I'm really hoping for the best.
Tom, if we carry on like this, people are still going to be listening to this in the new year. We have to move on and talk about the films that are part of our double bill, don't we? And what is that double bill?
Well, this is a serial killer double bill. I'm trying to recall whether I linked these two for any specific reason. I don't think I did. I think it was probably just sort of maybe obsessiveness, but I don't know. That doesn't really fit with The Love Butcher, but I can't remember. It's too long ago now. But yes, two serial killer films, The Last Horror Film and The Love Butcher, which probably should have been called The Love Gardener, really, but anyway.
That would have been better, wouldn't it? And we also have to say that this is sort of the beginning of another themed month, if you like. Now, it's that's not going to be an exact thing, because of course we're taking a bit of a break after this episode to enjoy Christmas and the New Year. So normally we would have liked to have put out these two episodes within a month, within an exact month. But the next episode after this is going to carry on the serial killer theme, and we'll tell you about that at the end of the show. But for now, let's look at these two films. They're very interesting, sort of quite, I would suppose, one of them quite grindhousey, I think. Yeah. But I think they fit the theme quite well. Why don't you start, Tom, with telling us about a film called The Last Horror Film, starring somebody that we're both very fond of.
Absolutely, a favourite of ours. Okay, so also known as Fanatic, Fanatical Extreme and Love to Kill, released in 1982 or 1984 in America. Directed by David Winters, written by David Winters, Judd Hamilton and Tom Klassen. Vinnie Durand, played by Joe Spinell, is going to be a famous movie director someday, at least in his own head. He spends his days driving a taxi, though that's merely a public ruse, something he does to earn money to help support his life with his mother. In the reality that exists within Vinnie's mind, he's going to seek out horror queen Jana Bates, played by Carolyn Monroe, and cast her as the lead in his new movie, a movie he has yet to make. The upcoming Cannes Film Festival is where he'll begin his journey toward finding Jana, who he has become obsessed with. He tearfully tells his disbelieving mother that he's off to seek his fortune and flies out to France to book into a hotel so that he can be around the festivities. Jana Bates has a new film entitled Scream. How funny, eh? That is debuting at the festival, and all of the critics are raving about it. Bates is the new queen of horror, the star that everyone wants to talk to. She's hanging around the big men of the film business, including film big shot Brett Bates, who also happens to be her ex-husband, filmmaker Stanley Klein, and her new lover, Alan Cunningham. As she attends glittering parties, Vinny seeks an entry into her life. He wants to convince her to star in her very last horror film, feeling she's better than merely being a horror actor. However, most people don't take too kindly to Vinny hanging around and stalking Jana. When the horror starlet visits Brett in his hotel room, she discovers him dead and beheaded in the bathroom. It seems there's a killer lurking around Jenna and her friends, killing them off one by one. And all the fingers of suspicion point to Vinny. He's always around when the murders happen, usually carrying a camcorder so that he can film Jana without her knowing it. Clearly obsessed and living in a fantasy world, things aren't right with Vinny, but is it really him doing the killings, or is another killer on the scene and using him as the fall guy? As the film ramps up to its conclusion, a twist gives us our answer as Vinny prepares to shoot the last horror film.
You're home early. Are you all right?
Yeah, I'm fine. Couldn't feel better. I got my ticket and I'm going to the south of France, the Cannes Film Festival, Ma. And I'm going to make my film with Jana Bates.
Vinny, stop thinking about those crazy ideas. You'll only get yourself upset again. I made baked macaroni. You don't eat right. More protein. You won't have so many crazy ideas.
Well, I don't know why the ideas are so crazy, you know, just because I want to make my film with Jana Bates. She wouldn't think my ideas are crazy, Ma.
It's wrong for you to be thinking about Jana Bates day and night. Why don't you be happy just driving the cab?
Because I got talent, Ma. I'm going to be a great director someday.
Don't yell at your mother.
Nobody better get in my way.
Here's some baked macaroni.
Oh, thanks, Ma, but I'm not hungry right now. Please, you understand.
Sure.
You make some when I come back. Look, Louis D's going to take care of the kid, and don't worry, he'll give you money and everything, okay?
Why are you doing this, Vinny?
I don't know, Ma. Why does you have to do anything? I just have to do my thing. Just say a prayer for me while I'm dying. I love you, Mom.
Goodbye.
All right, Chris, this was a new one for you. I'd seen it before a while ago, but I needed to refresh myself on it. But what do you think of the last horror film?
Yeah, well, it stars, of course, one of our big favourites, Joe Spinell, perhaps best known for starring as the deranged killer in Maniac, which is one of our favourite sort of character pieces. I would say we sort of always likened it to Christmas Evil as well, which is we seem to like these films, Tom, you and I, these sort of character pieces that focus on one particular person, this man who, or even a woman who's kind of losing their mind, and this is very much of the same thing. Now, Tom, people are going to be disappointed in me, especially Amanda, one of our faithful listeners, because I know she's a big fan of this. I have to say that the first time seeing it, I was sort of looking for that hook that was gonna get me into this, and it never really happened. I have to be honest with you. I walked away from this being a bit disappointed. Now, I think I'm trying to find a way to sort of pick this apart, really. I think Joe Spinell is very good in it, although I think his performance in Maniac is better. I think there are a couple of moments here where you're like, I can sort of understand why he was never considered a leading actor. In a lot of other productions, he sort of had this and Maniac and not really that much else. Because I think that there are times when he's quite ropey, but he plays a scuzzy character really well, I think, Joe Spinell. And in that way, you can compare that to his character in Maniac, in that they're similar characters, except that, obviously we're going to spoil, bits in this movie. That's what we do. The movie's very old. In that his character in Maniac is truly, truly deranged and is a killer, whereas here there's a bit of a mystery. We know that there's something very clearly wrong with Vinny, isn't there? Yeah. And that you understand that throughout the movie. But is he a killer? Is he not a killer? Well, the mystery of the film, we'll get into that. But, just to sort of finish off the general overview of it, I have to say that I came away from it a bit disappointed. I didn't I was sort of looking at me watch a bit, an hour into it and thinking, oh, I don't know if this one is quite working for me. And perhaps it's because I had expectations going in, having seen Maniac and loving Joe Spinell in that and being a fan of him, that I found myself quite disappointed. It never really truly got going for me, but with some individually good moments and some good performances here and there, some ropey ones though, I will say. I think there's some shaky performances in this. I don't think the dubbed over voices help particularly. No. It looks like most of the dialogue in the movie was dubbed over. I don't know why that is. Maybe they didn't record the audio properly, or it came out badly, so they dubbed it over later. I don't think that helps the performances, but generally, yeah, not too 100% sold on this one, and I know I'm disappointing a lot of people by saying that, Tom.
It does seem to be a film that has its fans. I mean, people, when something's coming up, people will say stuff to us on social media or through emails and stuff. Oh yeah, I'm looking forward to you doing this one. I really like it, and this seems to have got quite a bit of positive buzz from people, doesn't it?
Yeah, Amanda in particular was really like, oh, I'm so glad you guys are doing this one. She said it was going to be like a great Christmas present for her. So I would imagine she's probably listening to this now and thinking,
it's a lump of coal.
That motherfucker. Sorry, Amanda.
I had seen it, and I remember watching it when I first bought it years ago. I think it was the Troma release, and just really not liking it at all. This time round, I was charmed by a few bits and pieces here and there, but unfortunately, I can't go so far as to say I thought it was. I mean, let's not mince our words. There's ropey acting all around here. It's terribly unfocused. The dream sequences are just unintentionally comical, I think, sometimes. I do think it's a bit of a mess, but that's fine within the kind of films we're talking about here, as long as they've got that sort of vibe that we like about them. And unfortunately, it just wasn't there for me. There's bits and pieces here and there where I enjoyed it, and Joe Spinell was good, but he wasn't anywhere near his Maniac best. It was very unfocused, and it's like, okay, I'll give away the ending here for anyone who doesn't know, but we'll talk about that more later on. But okay, the twist is that actually he's not the killer, but he's still nuts enough that he broke into a room, broke a bottle, and started threatening her with it. You know what I mean? What are we supposed to think here?
I mean, he's not the killer, but he's on the way.
Yeah.
It just so happens that it kind of stops at the end here. But I would imagine if he carried on, eventually he would have gone that way.
But overall, I said to you before we started recording, I'm going to struggle a bit with this one because it just seems to have washed over me. Nothing really that memorable sticks with me. The only thing that really sticks with me is Joe Spinell's mum, the old woman. She's like, jabbering away.
Who's played by his real mother.
Yeah.
Which not an actor.
Really?
You could say. But there's a sort of there's a reality to it. There's a realness to it.
Yeah.
That I sort of enjoy. But I mean, even then, some of his scenes with his mother where he's like crying, I'm like, oh, this is a bit ropey for me, and I'm used to, Joe Spinell's overacting a little bit, but this is, and I wonder if it's just, the filmmaker himself, David Winters, if he didn't quite know how to pull this all together and have it focus. And I think also, considering it's a horror movie, I never felt any real tension in there. There's nothing that rivals the subway scene in Maniac, for example, where there's genuine tension for this woman.
Yeah.
That Frank Zito is there somewhere and he's going to get her, and you're wondering when's that going to happen. And there's real, I think Bill Lustig is a, I think it's a very good sign that Bill Lustig did go on to do other work in this sort of genre, whereas David Winters did not. As far as I can tell, this was his only horror movie, and I'm not quite sure I think what he tried to do is sort of incorporate a lot of the nastier elements of horror, but didn't really know how to thread it all together properly. What you're watching the film for, really, I think, is Joe Spinell, and it pains me to have to say it, really, but he's not always firing on all cylinders. Now, when he is, he plays, this character of Vinnie Durand in a very creepy way. For example, I'm thinking of the scene where he's got the big poster of Jana Bates there, played by Carolyn Monroe.
Yeah.
and he's sort of touching the poster, and then he's touching himself. Very creepy scene, and like we say, plays a very scummy character quite well. I mean, he's sweaty through the whole thing and grimy, and it's a very Joe Spinell-esque role, and that's where the comparison to Maniac will come in. But in every other way, or in several other ways, not every other way, but several other ways, I think this is a big step down from that.
Yeah, I think we're always going to like a bit of Spinell, but the material that he's given to work with just isn't of the caliber of Maniac. It's funny saying that about such a scuzzy film as Maniac, you know what I mean? But we love it, and I think you could say whatever you like about that film, but no one's ever going to convince me that Joe Spinell isn't great in it. He's focused. We know who Frank Zito is 100%, just from what he brings to it. And, you know, there's a couple of quibbles here and there in Maniac as well, but Frank is solid. You know, how he's written, how he's performed. This was just so unfocused, you know. We've got this guy. There's things I enjoy about him, like when he's on the phone to his mum from Cannes and he's like, yeah, you know, everyone wants to talk to me and I've got meetings with people and stuff like that. But he just very unfocused. So Joe Spinell wasn't doing his best, I don't think, with what he had. So I just couldn't really latch on to this character the same way as I enjoyed watching Frank Zito in Maniac. It just wasn't there for me.
I feel like, it seems like from what I can gather, Joe Spinell had some personal involvement in this movie. And I get the feeling that might have been a bad thing, because I think that perhaps he was reined in a little more, and Bill Lustig was a better director and was able to sort of to focus him more. Like, we keep using that word unfocused, but it is true. Yeah. We have to say, though, that, you know, Vintage Rand, he's a dreamer, isn't he? And he's a deranged dreamer. I mean, they tell you in a song in the movie, you know, you're a dreamer. And it's like, well, he's a dreamer. And he believes himself to be... Because the plot of this, essentially, I mean, we've covered it there, but we always go through it, is that this is a guy who's a taxi driver in New York. And he's obsessed with this woman, Jana Bates, played by Carolyn Monroe, and firmly believes that he is going to make a movie someday and she will be the lead star in it. Seems to be quite sort of... doesn't seem to be a fan of horror movies, really. In fact, there's one point where he sees a film by this filmmaker, Stanley Klein, which is... it's quite a strange movie. Quite a strange little scene in a movie within a movie where this old homeless woman, I think, just stabs this guy to death and then cuts open his chest, rips out his heart and eats it. And he's disgusted by, you know, he stumbles outside coughing, nearly sick, and then happens to run into the director coming down the stairs and sort of tells him off for making such a horrible movie. But is convinced in his own mind that he is, you know, this great, wonderful, acclaimed, celebrated movie director, and tells his mother that. And what's interesting, that his mother knows that he's talking nonsense.
Yeah, she does. She does.
So she must be used to it. You know, I'd like to imagine that throughout his life, he's just always made things up, and she knows what he's like.
I think there's probably the seeds of something quite decent here if it was just shaped a bit more. There seems to be something running through it as well. Maybe a bit of kind of a meta aspect of it, looking at horror films, you know, and the effect on people. I mean, there's one point where there's sort of like a priest or something talking to someone saying, I want to get your opinion on horror movies, you know, what kind of effect they have on people. And we're always seeing horror films within it. Horror films that seem to always end with a grisly death scene and then the end. And there seems to be that level of it, but it's not really well developed enough to be something you sit and ponder, you know what I mean? It's there, but you're not sitting thinking, yes, actually, you know, what are we watching here? It's just so unfocused and so undeveloped that it doesn't really bring much to it either.
Yeah, I quite like the meta aspect of it, you know, here and there. But I mean, you're absolutely right. There's a scene in the movie where Jana Bates has a press conference, and, you know, a press conference about a horror movie at the Cannes Film Festival. Which, I mean, this is the greatest fantasy version of a Cannes Film Festival you can imagine, where a character played by Carolyn Monroe wins an award ahead of Meryl Streep and Jane Fonda. You know, it's a fantastical version of Cannes Film Festival, and I happen to think films like horror films should play at the Cannes Film Festival. I'm not in with the arty farty crowd at all, but she has this press conference where there are all these news reporters there, and all they do is ask her about the effects of horror movies, and they're pretty much, it's almost as if they're saying to the people who are watching the movie, they're saying, look, everybody says horror movies are bad, and then of course she sits there and she says, well, no, actually they're not bad because of this, and this. So it definitely feels like the filmmakers are saying, horror movies aren't bad, guys. Come on, get it together. But it is it's notable for the fact that I don't think there's been another horror movie that's been set around the Cannes Film Festival. So
not that I know of. There's a funny bit as well where there's a panel there watching her film, and I can't remember. Does she get her face burned off with a blowtorch or something?
Yeah, she does. And there are all these judges at the Cannes Film Festival. Some of the most stip upper lift people you can imagine, by the way, who attend the Cannes Film Festival, the judges. And they're like, masterpiece, masterpiece.
And she's just like, screaming into the camera with a burnt face. And it's just like, okay, where are you getting this from?
Yeah, but we're going to talk about some of the killings in this, because the mystery's been set up that there's somebody who's going around murdering people, and they happen to have a camcorder, but you never see their face. So immediately we know, okay, obviously this is a mystery. I pretty much had figured out by that point that Vinny wasn't going to be the killer. That they'd obviously set him up as this gigantic red herring, and in fact it was going to be somebody else. Did you buy into the mystery of the film?
This time, I can't remember the first time I watched it. This time round, because of the way they'd done it, I kind of thought he's not the killer, because they're being a bit too cloak and dagger about it. If he was the killer, I think they'd have shown it a bit more. So I didn't know who it was, because the guy who it actually was the guy who got his head chopped off. And you can't. Was that just a ropey 80s effect, or was that a fake death? You couldn't really tell. So yeah, I didn't buy that he was going to be the killer.
Yeah, well, as it turns out, it's Brett Bates, who was the ex-husband of Jana Bates, and as you say, he was. She'd found him in the bathroom, dead with his throat slit, and then of course his head fell off, and there was somebody else in the bath filming it. And as it turns out, he'd faked his death quite convincingly, I have to say. Apparently, he was always a practical joker, and he'd been, he was so angry that she'd left him that he decided to kill off everybody around her, basically. And I have to say, Carolyn Munro in this, I like Carolyn Munro very much. She's a brilliant scream queen. I think what doesn't help is that they've got. Now, I know for sure that Joe Spinell is the one who's overdubbing his own voice. Right. That's clearly him. I don't know about the other actors in the movie. I don't know who overdubbed what. I don't know if that was Carolyn Munro who came in and then did the dubbing on her own. Because I've not been able to establish a reason for why most of the dialogue is overdubbed.
I don't know either. Because her accent is a bit better than it is in Horror High, where she tries to play American as well. But I can't tell whether it's her or not either.
Yeah, because Carolyn Munro is English, of course. Yeah. And I think it detracts from her. Really, I don't think she's particularly great in this. Really, which is strange because some of our feedback, says to the contrary, that she's a good sort of final girl, and I don't know really. But don't get me wrong, I'm not taking away from her as an actress. I'm taking away from the voice performance. Yeah. Whoever did that, it doesn't seem like a natural fit to me. I think when you overdub things, very naturally you're going to lose some of what might have made the original performance work very well. It's one of the reasons why I don't tend to like dubbing on things very much. And of course, a lot of the Italian movies I love happen to have it, and you always wonder, well, would that performance actually been better if we'd heard it in its original language with subtitles? So I think that some of that is taken away from that, and also the fact that Joe Spinell's doing all of this stuff and overacting and everything and doing these scenes where he's just losing his mind and has had to then do all of that again in the studio afterwards. Do you lose some of the intensity of that? By doing that? And I kind of think maybe they did with this one. I just never felt any tension really, Tom. I throughout the whole thing, and I kept waiting for a couple of really killer scenes to come in. Some nice gore effects, the axe death where one of the guys gets sort of chopped to death with an axe by the killer. I thought was done quite well. You don't really see anything, but you just sort of see the guy swinging the axe down into the ground and blood spewing out. Done, reasonably well. But it's trying to say something, but whoever put the film together and the writers of this, two of whom are actually in the movie, David Winters and Judd Hamilton. Judd Hamilton plays the love interest here of Janet Bates, and David Winters is Stanley Klein, the filmmaker that Vinny runs into on the stairs and has a big go at him. And I just don't think that they've put it together very well. There's ambition there, and there's some decent ideas, and I certainly liked parts of the movie, don't get me wrong, but and was captivated by some of what Joe Spinell was doing. But overall, I sort of walked away thinking, it's disappointing, Tom.
I think what might have made it better for me is we've talked about how we like things like Maniac, things like Christmas Eve, or where you're spending this time with someone who's unraveling and doing horrible things and so on. We didn't really get that here because he was sort of a bit too in the middle, He wasn't going so far as to actually kill people, but like I said earlier, he thinks nothing of breaking into a room, smashing a bottle and threatening her with it. But then in the end, we're supposed to be like, Vinny, go Vinny, when he actually sort of saves the day kind of thing. So we're not really spending our time with a maniac and seeing what makes him tick. It could have been about this mama's boy who's, like you said, lied all his life, and as he's gotten older, his lies have got bigger, his delusions have got bigger. And I probably would have preferred it if he was the killer, and just went with that a bit more rather than this silly red herring plot. If he'd have just went there and started to kill everyone around her, or everyone he thought had wronged her, because he's got this unhealthy fascination with her, that sort of thing. If they'd have maybe kept her a bit more focused that way, so it's like, okay, what makes this guy tick? Why is he doing what he's doing? Let Joe Spinell really get into that rather than being a bit wishy-washy, because he's nuts, but he's not that nuts, and in the end we're supposed to think he's got some sort of redemption. Just doesn't work.
I agree with you. I think maybe it would have worked better if he had been the killer, and we'd I think there's a little bit of disbelief there in how, the mystery of the killer, how that turns out. I think if you'd gotten rid of that, but I mean, perhaps it would have been too much like Maniac, I don't know, but I think if he had been the killer, and just watching him becoming more and more unhinged and unable to kind of stop himself in his obsession to get to this woman, I think might have made it a bit better, really. But instead, we spend a lot of time with we spend a lot of time with Jana and the other people, and I think the focus of it really should be Joe Spinell, guided a little bit better, focus a little bit more by somebody who kind of knows what they're doing, and I think you'd have had a stronger film out of it. As it is, if you're a fan of Joe Spinell from Maniac, I think it's worth seeing. I don't dislike that I saw it. I mean, this is the first time, as I say, I've seen it. I bought the Blu-ray edition from 88 Films, and it sort of looked fairly decent. Apart from, there's a couple of places there where they include some footage that was previously cut out, and the quality of that wasn't great. But overall, I just kind of walked away thinking, I'm glad I saw it, because it's one I've wanted to see for a while. But it disappointed me, and I know there are going to be some. I know for a fact, because there are some people I've spoken to on Twitter who happen to really like this, and it's one of their favourites. And I know they're going to be listening to me and thinking, "Wow, I can't believe you don't feel the same way I do." But it just didn't particularly grab me. I was waiting. I was like, "This is Joe Spinell. I know I'm going to enjoy this," and I think there are a lot of problems around him, and I think that because of that, it's not quite. It's not what I was hoping for. I'll say that much.
Yeah, I agree. I wouldn't go so far as to say I disliked it. I was sort of mildly entertained by it for what it was, but just too unfocused for me to really latch onto and have a truly good time with. But not a waste of time. Just. I mean, you mentioned before it might have been a bit too similar to Maniac if they'd went with him as the killer, and I think I would have been okay with that. I mean, we'll talk about Mr. Robbie in a moment, the proposed sequel to Maniac, but if that had ever got made, it would have been a nice little, trilogy of like a sort of serial killer anthology for Spinell. I think it would have been quite a good thing, but it wasn't to be. But not sold on the last horror film, unfortunately, but I didn't hate it.
No, and it's not, I don't dislike it. I was just very meh on it, really. That's what I walked away just thinking. And this is one of those films I can already tell, and not just simply based on how many sort of positive, positive things we've heard from other people, but just in general, I can see this is the sort of film that it will appeal to some people and it won't appeal to others. Yeah. And it's just one of those ones that, even though it would have seemed like the kind of film that you and I would be all about, it just didn't. It didn't quite connect for me in the way it has with other people. But, watch it for Joe Spinell, certainly, because I think if you're a fan of him from Maniac, there are bits and pieces in there where you're like, that's the Joe Spinell that I adore.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I've got nothing more to say on it, but hopefully you've got some of that trivia that I do love to listen to.
Well, Tom, I'm glad you asked, because I always do, of course, and I prepare it especially for you.
Thank you.
Now, according to IMDb, now this is interesting, the film was shot around the 1981 Cannes Film Festival entirely without permission or permits. All of the footage you see shot around the festival was done so guerrilla style.
Well, I've always got admiration for people who do stuff like that, but it might have contributed to the unfocusedness of it, if they're just like doing it on the fly and, okay, what have we got? What have we got to use? How are we going to stitch this together? Maybe that's an aspect of it.
I agree, but also it can be a mistake sometimes in a movie to film the posters of movies that are better than this, like Cannibal Holocaust and Possession and films like that, know. But like we say, a very fantastical version of the Cannes Film Festival where Caroline Munro, God bless her, wins an award over Meryl Streep. But I do love Caroline Munro. Anyway, lead stars Joe Spinell and Caroline Munro had worked together before on 1980's Maniac and 1978's Star Crash, which I heard from our good friend there, Amanda, is a very good sort of Star Wars ripoff, which I'm interested to watch at some point. Directed by Luigi Cozzi. In fact, Monroe did these 3 films all in a row. She had come to prominence starring in Hammer horror films and worked primarily as a B-movie actress through the 80s and 90s. She continues to act today and is considered a classic scream queen. Spinell was a noted character actor, having appeared in classic films like The Godfather Part 2, and Taxi Driver. He is perhaps best known for his role in Bill Lustig's Maniac, of course, as we've discussed, where he plays the demented Frank Zito. The leading role granted him much acclaim, cementing the film as a cult classic, and it's a big fan of ours, Tom. Spinell continued to have supporting roles through much of his career and appeared in another Bill Lustig film, Vigilante, in 1983, which is also quite a good sort of gritty exploitation film.
Yeah, I love a bit of Vigilante. I've got that on Blu-ray from Blue Underground, but if we ever carry on after the Section 3 list, I think we need to do a bit of a Vigilante month, maybe, Vigilante, Death Wish, that sort of thing. Could be good.
Ooh, Tom, you're getting me going. Spinell also filmed a short film follow-up to Maniac. Tom mentioned this a little while ago, entitled Maniac 2 Mr. Robbie in 1986. The short, directed by Buddy Giovinazzo, was made to attract finances for a possible feature-length sequel, but Spinell sadly passed away from a heart attack in 1989 before this could happen. So while we're on the subject of that, Maniac 2 Mr. Robbie, Tom, I would imagine you've seen that. I mean, you pretty much mentioned that you did. Yeah. It was actually on this release of the last horror film from 88 Films. I'm quite a big fan of this short. I think it's a good little thing, underdeveloped in its own way, but I would have loved to have seen a Maniac too.
Yeah, and a nice way of doing it as well. A different focus. It was a child's entertainer who gets letters from the kids who have been, abused by their parents, that sort of thing, and he goes and kills the parents. And I thought that was a nice little concept. It's a real shame it never happened.
Very interesting. A big shame that didn't happen. We mentioned it before. Joe Spinell's own mother, Filomena Spagnuolo, billed here as Mary Spinell, plays his mother in the movie. We didn't actually mention the ending scene, which is pure comedy.
It is.
Basically, essentially, at the end of the movie, Vinnie Duranda's taken a chainsaw to Brett Bates, the killer, and cut his head off and everything, and then he's just screaming. I thought was played quite well by Joe Spinell. And then we cut to this scene of him sitting. Now, are we supposed to? What are we supposed to get from that? Are we supposed to infer that this is sort of a dream sequence of some kind, or a fantasy sequence, or do you reckon that Vinny actually made it out of the film alive? I would imagine he'd been taken down for on charges of stalking.
The way I saw it was going to either be one of two things. This has happened, and he's then made a film of it, and that's what he sat down and shown his mother. Or the whole thing was just a film, and he's made a film, and he's shown his mother. So he might be, just a normal, well-adjusted guy who's made a film. I don't know. It's one of those two things, but I could be wrong.
So I quite like the sound of that. I didn't even think about that. Yeah, and so we get this scene at the end where he's sort of blabbing away to his mother. You got any of that macaroni? And then the final line of the film comes from his mother, who just says, "You got a joint?" And he hands her a joint, and then the movie's like da 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 da, and it finishes. It's I don't know if it tonally quite fits with the rest of the movie, but it did give me a good chuckle.
Yeah, I don't know what to say about that, man. It's just very strange, but it did make me laugh as well.
Yeah, exactly. Co-writer and producer Judd Hamilton plays Alan Cunningham, lover of Monroe's character Jana. Hamilton was actually married to Monroe at the time. This was Cunningham's final film as an actor, having previously starred in Star Crash along with Spinell and Monroe. He appears to have no creative involvement in filmmaking since it was released. Director David Winters had a particular interest in dancing, stemming from his appearances in all sorts of Broadway productions, including the original run of West Side Story. He went on to play Arab in the movie version of the film and made a career out of teaching Hollywood actors how to dance for performances in movies. He had also directed TV movies and documentaries beginning in the 60s. The last horror film was the only true horror project he directed, and he plays the role of Stanley Klein in the film. His wife at the time, Jaylene Winters, plays the naked beauty in the jacuzzi at the beginning. The film can be found easily on DVD and Blu-ray in the UK from 88 Films. This version is billed as the Uncut Special Edition and contains previously excised gore footage, so this is of a lower quality than the rest of the footage. In America, the film can be found on DVD and Blu-ray from Troma Entertainment, where they proudly display music from Depeche Mode on the front cover, almost as big as the title of the film itself. As a selling point, because there is a song from Depeche Mode in it at the beginning, I believe. So there you go, the last horror film. I'm sure we've disappointed lots of people, Tom, and we'll be getting plenty of negative iTunes reviews coming in.
I like to think that our real, true audience, the ones who get us, will, it's just the way it goes, and they understand that, and we understand that. It's just the way it goes sometimes. Everyone's different, aren't they? But, I didn't hate it, so hopefully they'll kind of see where they're coming from. The same way I see where, if someone does manage to get into it, I can see where they're coming from. It's a trashy little thing that I could imagine some people might really love. Yeah,
you never know. I may go back and watch it and change my mind someday. And if I do, you guys will be the first to hear about it. But saying all this, I'll probably get a bullet in the neck from a sniper rifle through the window, and it'll be Amanda across the street on a building, standing on the roof of a building across the street, taking me out for not being a big fan of it. There we go. So, Tom, that's the last horror film. Now it's time for us to move on to this second film in our double bill. And it is a little film called The Love Butcher. I almost couldn't get that out. The Love Butcher. Girls Aloud had a song called Love Machine. This is the sequel. The Love Butcher. Also known as Nothing at All. So I don't know why I read that out. Released in 1975. Directed by Don Jones and Michael Angel. Written by Michael Angel and Jim Evergreen. Now let me read you the synopsis of this one. A young girl lies dead on the ground, a pitchfork jutting out of her stomach. It's the second murder in a month, and the police know they're dealing with a serial killer, but they have no clues nor any real leads. Local reporter Russell is annoyed that the police have turned up with nothing, but he's equally as clueless as they are. Well, sometimes evil hides in plain sight. Just look at Tom Elliott. And that's true of crippled gardener Caleb, played by Eric Stern. Short-sighted and of few words, Caleb cuts a sad figure to most. He's frequently bad-mouthed by the people he works for, particularly rich women whose gardens he tends to. What they don't know is that Caleb hides a secret, and it begins at home. Inside his house, Caleb speaks with his brother Lester, who teases him, calls him ugly, degrades him. Lester, on the other hand, believes himself to be beautiful and attractive, the very opposite of Caleb. In reality, Lester no longer exists. He's merely a black mannequin. Actually, he looks a bit like a bowling ball with a wig on top. But he becomes Caleb's alter ego, allowing this man to dress up, look good, and visit the women in disguise. Yes, it's Caleb in the guise of Lester that is murdering women. He believes himself an Adonis, though claims to abhor sex, even though he molests the women he kills. From playing a handsome Texan man to a saucy Latino, Lester provides the confidence and sweet talk that Caleb never could, and he uses it to claim his victims. When the deed is done, Caleb returns to normal, just the unassuming gardener. The only woman who treats him kindly is Flo, who happens to be reporter Russell's fiancée. She offers him lunch and treats him with kindness, something he appreciates greatly. Unfortunately, his alter ego Lester most definitely does not, and soon Lester declares Flo a target. As Lester departs for Flo's house with the pretense of being Caleb's psychiatrist as a way in, Russell manages to put all of the clues together. He realises that Caleb has been around all of the women who've been murdered, many of them with garden implements. Only he has the unassuming nature that has helped him avoid suspicion until now. Russell, now fearing for Flo's life, races out to the house, but it seems Caleb, as Lester, is already there, and there's about to be a slaughter as Lester reaches his endgame.
What happened? You missed, Les. You missed. The great lover, for the first time, you missed.
Shut up, shut up, shut up.
You're losing your touch. You're finished, Les.
Caleb, you're a bleeding heart son of a bitch. I may never let you out again.
You can't go on doing those terrible things, Les. You're evil. You're gonna destroy us both. Why didn't you die when you were a boy? Why didn't you die when you're supposed to?
Beauty is not evil. I am the great magnet to all women. Your jealousy knows no ends, Caleb. If I didn't need you, I'd let you destroy yourself.
I can't stop you, but someone will.
No one will stop me. Only you can do that. And since I am the stronger, well, you'll just have to live with me, Caleb, until you die.
Shut up. Damn you.
So, Tom, this is an obscure little number, one that you and I have just seen for the very first time. What did you think of The Love Butcher?
We've not talked about this amongst ourselves, so I really don't know your views on it, but I get the feeling we're going to disagree on this one. I don't know why, it's just a feeling within the pit of my soul. But I liked it. I wouldn't say I thought it was great. It seems that, again, you know, in better hands it could have been really great. But there's just something about it that I liked. It's a bit more of the spending time with someone who is clearly deranged and unraveling that I like. Not done as well as something like Maniac or Christmas Evil, but there was a commitment from Eric Stern when he was playing Caleb and Lester that I just really found enjoyable. You know, it was such a vanity-free performance. You know, he was willing to make himself look that way and do this performance, which at times was very silly. I mean, that scene where he's conducting the orchestra in the mirror and stuff like that. There's a lot about it which I think could have been done better. And overall, I think it doesn't really go above a certain level in terms of the violence, the gore, the really being truly gripping. But it just had enough where I just ended it, and I thought, well, I kind of enjoyed that, you know. It was at that level, not like, wow, that was great or anything. It just had a certain something that I guess we'll talk out that I liked. But how about you?
Interesting. Tom, I liked it too. Yes, I did. I had you fooled there for a moment, didn't I? I have to say that going into it, you and I were watching a VHS print of it, and it didn't look great or anything, and I thought, oh dear, I don't know about this, but maybe we'll have another invasion of the Blood Farmers on our hands. But in actual fact, I think it's sort of quite competently made. It's reasonably well acted. Now, I've got this in the trivia section, but I'm going to mention it here because it's sort of, I think it might explain why we both like this. This movie was co-directed by Don Jones. Don Jones also directed another film that we covered on the Strange and Deadly show way back, a film called Schoolgirls in Chains.
Right.
Which I remember both of us saying that had some real potential in it, and unfortunately was stuck with a name that was very sort of exploitative and nasty. I believe it was called Abducted.
Yeah.
It might be, which I think was a more fitting title for it. Schoolgirls in Chains makes it sound like it's going to be some sort of softcore erotica porn kind of thing, and it isn't at all. It was done quite well and features a similar theme to this about, in that you had these two brothers who, their mother was dead, and there was a bit of a psycho element to that, and there is in this as well. And I think Don Jones, having seen two of his movies now, I don't know exactly how much involvement he had in this, but he was co-director on it. I think he's a director who had some real potential, and I think if he'd been able to capitalise on that and maybe had a bit more money to work with, might have actually, worked his way up to making a really, really good film someday. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, he hasn't quite been able to accomplish that with the two we've seen, but I like him.
Yeah.
And I like this, and like you say, this film really is about Eric Stern, isn't it? At the end of the day, and he is acting his arse off, Tom. He is acting his arse off, and he is chewing up scenery left, right, and centre. And some of it is silly, and it does feel a bit like he's doing his comedy routine, coming in with different characters, every single time. But I think they did a remarkable job. There was a couple of times here where I had to think, is that really the same guy? Because as Caleb, he is this. You got to look up a photo of him to see what he looks like as Caleb. He's got these glasses on. It makes his eyes look huge underneath them, and balding and scruffy, and he walks around. But all he ever really says is "Yes, ma'am." Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Well, thank you dearly. that kind of thing. And but then he transforms into this character named Lester, who is pretty much a ladies' man, really.
Yeah.
And I think it's an astonishingly good performance considering what they're working with it. Now, that's say it is silly, like we're saying. He's chewing up the scenery, and he's not always, he's not always focused. But when he is, I thought he was really quite a standout in this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is, if that central performance had not been as good, I think the film would have just fallen completely flat, I imagine, because it tends to be the things that are around him that are the weaker elements, like this reporter who is looking into the murders that are happening around this town, around this neighborhood, whatever, and him and these overly long melodramatic domestics that he has with his wife are just like, they go on. They have a big argument, they have sex and makeup, then they have another argument, and it's just like, oh, for God's sake, what do you add to this film? Not that much. You have the police detectives who are looking for the killer, and the first scene where we see them, they're at a murder scene, which a reporter is walking all over, no police cordon or anything. The reporter just walks in, so what's going on here? And the detective is like, we're never going to catch this guy, and it's like, fucking hell, that'd never happen now, you know what I mean?
No, not at all. No.
What was the police comment on this? We're never going to catch this man. So, and the cops were just a bit shit as well. So it's
useless.
Yeah, so it's their stories that were the weak elements. But when we get back to Caleb and Lester, again, I think there have been better, dual personality stories in terms of the way some of it was presented. When we see when we see Caleb and Lester together, where Eric Stern is Caleb, Lester is this dummy with a wig on, and it's voiceover. I am better than you. I'm, handsome, and you are ugly. And I thought that was a bit like, but but still, you know, it was enjoyable for what it was within the sort of reality that it created.
Yeah, I agree with you. I was really quite impressed with that aspect of it. I just think I wish it was in a slightly better story, really, and because I do think the story, it drags a bit, and there's not a tremendous amount of payoff through the whole thing. You know, it's I'm not expecting super amounts of gore or anything like that, but it really was really. Most of the people in here felt quite disposable to me. You know, got this character of Russell, who's kind of supposed to be the lead guy next to Eric Stern, and really never is fully developed. He's just a bit of an angry dude, really, who wants to get to the bottom of it. And but there are some surprising things that happen towards the end of the movie with that character and his fiancée, which I didn't expect, to be honest. I thought this was going to be fairly predictable. As far as how it ended, you know, it seemed obvious to me that, you know, Caleb was going to come in, or Lester was going to come in, and Russell would come home and find him with Flo, and they would manage to kill him off, and that would be the end of the movie. And actually, it doesn't happen that way. What actually happens is Lester, or Caleb as Lester, turns up and kills Russell with a pair of garden shears, and kills Flo.
Yeah,
bashes her to death, and you're thinking, blimey, you know, these are the two characters who you sort of didn't expect would be killed. These are going to be the heroes of the piece, aren't they? But actually, no, they're not really. And Caleb gets away with it at that precise moment. You're like, wow, I really didn't expect that. We get a twist at the end. I mean, actually, before we get to the twist and everything, how did you feel about the acting in general? I thought the acting was good all around. You know, like for a film of this time. I mean, even Schoolgirls in Chains has some real ropey moments in it, but had a couple of performances where you're like, oh, you know, you're sort of onto something here.
Yeah, for the level of film we're talking here, I think it was decent. It was good, you know, and I suppose we've skipped around a bit, and I know that some people listen to this podcast who won't necessarily watch the films because some of them are quite obscure and hard to find, and I do that too with podcasts sometimes. If I enjoy the show, I will listen even if I haven't seen the film that they're talking about. So I think the general thing that happens in the movie is that Caleb is the crippled gardener, you know, hunched over, big glasses, bald, you know, bit of a simpleton, and he is doing gardening for women for the most part. Sometimes women who are attached, sometimes women who aren't, and he goes round and he does his gardening thing, very unassuming, very devoted to his work, you know, and it's against the backdrop of all these murders happening. So what will generally happen is Caleb will go and do the gardening. The woman, whoever it might be in the house, is generally quite unkind to him, you know, can be quite cruel, that sort of thing. And when that happens, that's when Lester will come out. Caleb will go home, and then Lester will take over. He'll get all dressed up, you know, and Eric Stern, a handsome guy, he would go round and sometimes quite easily seduce the woman in the house, sleep with them, you know, within 10 minutes they're in bed, and then he would kill them. So it was, you know, that's the general thing, and it's just like from woman to woman to woman to woman to woman, and there's a few variations as it goes along, you know. As time goes on, there's a couple who won't sleep with him, and, you know, that angers him a lot. He's, you know, it sort of really sort of gets his dander up when they won't speak to him, sleep with him. And you know, so there's a bit of a struggle between Caleb and Lester as to who's the dominant personality, and you know, I just ate all this stuff up. I thought it was really good, but that's the general gist of it. And then you've got these detectives who can't find the killer, and you've got the reporter who is trying to get the story, but also trying to solve it too, because he thinks the detectives aren't doing a very good job. So that's the basics of the story, isn't it?
Yeah, and I wish that those aspects of the story were more interesting, because unfortunately they're not. But I have to say, I mean, the film's only an hour and 20 minutes long. It's not very long, and I never found myself particularly bored, really. Yeah. But I think that's, you know, mostly due to Eric Stern. You're right. As Lester is they're both very defined characters, really. Caleb is the sort of, you know, the lowly gardener. Lester's supposed to be this man who thinks of himself as, you know, like we say, as an Adonis, and believes that he can sleep with any woman. After he's done it, of course, then goes crazy and sort of admonishes the woman for having slept with him in the first place and having these sort of carnal desires, and a very interesting thing. Now I have to say that there are moments, when he comes in as having this accent and everything, selling, giving away records to this one woman. And he comes in with a moustache on, he's got this Latin accent and everything. I mean, it is comical, I'm not quite sure that really, that worked as well as they wanted. And there's one point actually where he comes in with a British accent. I'm like, no.
And she's like, no. Hold on, you were here before dressed as the the record salesman. So that was quite good that she wasn't fooled.
Yeah, I do like that. And then he drops the British accent after that. But he never actually explains why he was dressed up as a record salesman before, why he had a different accent and everything. She's just like, okay, well, fix the plumbing. But when he kills that woman, it's quite an interesting death, actually. Something I've never seen in a horror movie, really, which is that he takes a garden hose, attaches it to the tap, turns it on, and then jumps into a swimming pool and force feeds her the hose, and she basically drowns from the inside.
Yeah, it's quite brutal in its way, I suppose. And he jumps in and his wig comes off, because I think Eric Stern actually was bald from stuff I've seen of him. So I guess that must have made it all a bit earlier. But he was a sort of tall, quite muscular, handsome guy. And there's a video of him on YouTube in later life, which is quite sad actually. But so he was bald, and I guess that's what helped him be able to sort of change his appearance so easily. Yeah,
and I think does so very, very well. Like we say, he's not always an 8 out of 10, but there are points where he really is. And I just have to say, I was just really impressed the most with that particular part of the film, really. Just him and the transformation of him, and the fact that could be the same person. They really do a very good job of that sort of the transition from Caleb to Lester, thinking, wow, that really does look like a very different person.
Yeah.
To the point where I was questioning whether it was, and of course it was, but they just did a very good job with that. I feel like Don Jones as a director has some cool ideas, but just perhaps was never quite competent enough to realise them fully. But I think if he had, and had, put it into a more exciting story, it would have been very interesting. We all of this happens, and we get the deaths of Russell and Flo, and then some police almost they find him on the streets, and he's acting very, very weird. And it seems like at this point there's a separation happening between Caleb and Lester. The personalities, and we get this scene at the end there where they're basically fighting with each other, and Caleb is now like, look, I'm free of you, and he ends up stabbing the mannequin to death. I don't think the mannequin felt anything, Tom, so I think we're okay. But we find out a little twist here at the end of the movie.
Well, before we get to that though, what triggers this is that there's actually a woman who is very kind to Caleb. So she she brings him into the house, she feeds him, and that kind of upsets the status quo of things. Caleb is quite empowered by this, and Lester is very annoyed by this. So he puts his best suit on, doesn't he? And it's quite a bizarre scene, because he goes to her house and he's like, I'm here to talk about Caleb the gardener. And she's like, okay. And it's like, something's happened to Caleb. He's gone a bit nuts. What's happened? Nothing. I just gave him something to eat. Oh dear. It's quite a bizarre scene, because if someone came round to talk about it, you'd be like, what, you did talk about the guy? Fuck off, mate. What? But that's a good scene as well, where he's sort of walking along the street and he's losing control, and the cops come and speak to him and stuff like that. All good stuff.
Yeah.
All good stuff.
Yeah, all good. Good scenes, really. And I think it needed a few more really killer scenes to get it up there. But some good stuff in there. And shall we get to that twist?
Let's do it.
Well, the twist is that in fact, Caleb had died as a child, had run off and been hit by a car, I believe. And in fact, Lester, who was his brother, was essentially scorned by his mother and had said, well, look, you're not Caleb. And Lester's like, I'll be Caleb, I'll be just like him. So essentially, Lester had spent his life playing the part of his brother and himself. So, it's an interesting little twist at the end there. And still at the end had sort of had pushed all the blame on Lester, because at the end of it, Caleb, he returns to Caleb and feels that he's killed Lester off and now he's just Caleb, and really refuses to sort of take the blame for the things he's done. Has decided that, well, no, Lester's the one who did them, which is, quite a good story, isn't it? I'll blame somebody else who actually doesn't exist anymore. Interesting. I thought interesting twist to the whole thing.
I thought it was really good. It's I think it's usual in these things for the sort of weaker personality, the Caleb personality, to be the sort of subservient one, whereas the more powerful one, the one who does all the killing, is usually the delusion. I mean, if you think of Norman Bates, Norman is the sort of, the nervous kid in a man's body, and Mother is the dominant one. Mother is the delusion. Whereas this is a bit of a switch on that. Caleb is actually the delusion, and he's the more subservient character, the more subservient part of the personality. So I think it was a really nice spin on it.
Yeah, I think they did a good job with it. Obviously influenced by Psycho to some degree. Much like, Schoolgirls in Chains had moments like that with the brothers, and them, sort of being indebted to their mother who had long since died. I think this, this Don Jones had a few good ideas in his pocket, and of course he co-directed it with Michelangelo, who also co-wrote it. So obviously we have to give some credit to him as well. But I have to say I liked it, Tom. I'm sure there'll be some people who are mad as hell that we like this more than the last horror film. What can I say? I had no real expectations going into this, and came away from it thinking, yeah, that's all right. That's all right. You did a good job. You probably did the best you could. You could have done better, but what you've got here, really, it's all about Eric Stern, and I think Eric Stern is I can't pretend that I've seen anything he's done. To be honest, I can't really think of anything, but. Although he's been, sort of a supporting actor and had, bit parts in all sorts of things, so it's possible I've glanced at him once or twice before and not really even known it. But good actor, I think, in this role, and he's what makes it work.
I think I would actually buy this. I don't know whether there's a decent release out there or something, but if someone done a nice release of it, I think I might actually buy it. Unfortunately, Eric Stern has passed away now, because I would have really loved to have got his input on it, a commentary or something where he's talking us through his role and stuff like that, but it's not to be. But I think I'd still buy this if someone cleaned it up and done a nice release of it.
Well, I'm going to tell you about that in a moment, Tom.
Can't wait.
But shall we move on to the trivia?
Yes, let's do it.
Let's do it. Well, the film was, I've kind of said all this before, really, but the film was co-directed by Don Jones, someone familiar to Strange and Deadly, having directed the 1973 film Schoolgirls in Chains, which we covered on an early episode. And I remember we liked it with its flaws. Jones would go on to direct the cheesy slasher film The Forest in 1981. His last film was Molly and the Ghost in 1991. The other director, Michelangelo, only ever directed this one film, but he did have acting parts in a number of movies until the early 90s and continued to co-write films. Lead actor Eric Stern did go on to plenty of small roles in TV shows and a few movies here and there. In fact, he starred in a trio of Marvel superhero-related TV shows from the 70s, those being The Amazing Spider-Man, The Incredible Hulk and Wonder Woman. Little bit parts in those. His final role was as a maitre d' in a film called A Girl to Kill For in 1990. Stern unfortunately passed away in 2012 from cancer. You said, Tom, that you saw YouTube footage of him later in his life?
Yeah. Unfortunately, he'd been battling cancer for about 3 years at this point. It might actually be from 2012. I just wanted to go on there and see whether there's anything of him talking about this or something. And unfortunately, he's sort of sitting there in front of his camera, and he's talking about, I've been battling cancer for 3 years, and now I want to raise some money for kids who are battling cancer. And he's trying to get on some show. I think it's something like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire or some, that kind of a show. But it's just quite, obviously he's an older man by this point, but just having seen him in this, where he's sort of strong and handsome and stuff like that, and then to see him as an older man who'd been battling cancer for 3 years, it's just quite a sad thing.
It is sad. Cancer's touched my life too many times, unfortunately. So I can sympathise, and I'm sad to see he's gone. And I'm especially sad to see that it seems like he never really did anything like this again.
No.
Because I could imagine this sort of performance, perhaps giving him some stronger work in the future. Really, it's a shame that. But this is a real standout role, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so the film is available and fairly easy to find in the UK on a DVD release from Jeff Films, GEF. Although I can't speak to the picture quality on this release. The same release is also available in America as well. Perhaps the best release to get, if you can find it, is from Code Red, who released the film on DVD in 2013. Now, this release features an audio commentary with director Don Jones and a couple of moderators. It now appears to be out of print, though, and it fetches a hefty price. But that's going to be the one that you want to get if you want to get it in sort of best picture quality. So it is available. I did see the other release, the one from Jeff Films, is about £12. Right. On Amazon. So, if you want to pick that up, you can. But like I say, I don't know if that's just a straight rip of the VHS. I really can't say. But, not too difficult to find. And I would say recommended, really.
Me too. It's sort of grown in my estimation with the talking about it as well. Sometimes that happens. Yeah. You watch it and you think, oh, yeah, that's good. And then you really talk it out and you kind of think, well, actually, I think I actually like it more, and I'll probably like it more the next time I see it. So it's a grower.
I think it's going to be one of those. I remember in the first 5 minutes thinking, I expected this to be really ropey, and actually it's, I'm liking this, and the acting sort of, quite decent and everything, and it carries that throughout the thing. Very interesting movie, and yeah, definitely one that I would say, £12 I think is good value for this film.
Definitely, and there's still time. Hopefully someone like 88 Films might do a better one.
Oh, that would be brilliant. Yeah. So that's it, guys. That is the end of our double bill. We hope you're not too mad at us for our thoughts on the last horror film. But just remember, we didn't hate it. But we definitely very much enjoyed The Love Butcher. And now, Tom, I think it's time for us to read and listen to some feedback. Diddly-doo. Okay, so we're going to start with an email from Rob Maloha. Now, this was an email that was supposed to have reached us for the last show. For some reason, it didn't. It didn't turn up at all. I don't know why. Rob doesn't know why. So we didn't get a chance to include it on the last episode. But this is the one where we were talking about the Mad Foxes and Street Killers. Alright, so Rob says, Aloha, Chris and Tom. I do enjoy a film that leaves me gobsmacked, and Mad Foxes certainly did that. At first I found it hard to enjoy with the bad acting, unlikable lead, comic villains, dubious plot and terrible dubbing. But as the film went on, I'm afraid to admit that I quite enjoyed it. And don't get me wrong, it was a sleazy, chaotic, badly made and in the poorest possible taste, but a crazy film I haven't seen since Pieces. That's a very good point. Who couldn't love the bed-hopping characters, gratuitous male and female full frontal nudity, car porn, camp Nazi biker gang, lashings of gore, and my personal favourite, an inept castrating kung fu club? Amazing. Films as bad as this don't come around very often, so I think this is something to be cherished, and I'm going to enjoy inflicting it on a few unsuspecting friends in the future. Street Killers was a far more disturbing affair. Helmut Berger's portrayal of, I forgot his name was Helmut Berger.
Yeah, I had a couple of Helmut Bergers over the weekend. It's very tasty.
Yeah. Blimey, I don't know what that means. I don't know what that means, Tom. I've heard words, but I don't know their meaning, and I'm confused. Helmut Berger's portrayal of Nanni Vitali was truly terrifying and left me feeling very uneasy in many scenes, particularly his terrorization of women. It was one of those films where you really enjoy seeing the villain get his comeuppance, and although I was cheering for Santini to do a bit more damage, the broken look on Vitali's face when he was carted off did the job. Despite the uneasiness to some of the scenes, there was a lot to like about Street Killers. Obviously, Berger's performance was fantastic to create such an air of menace. It was well directed with some great set pieces. I particularly like the build-up to the roadblock cops being shot, and the score by Umberto Samali. I think that is Samala. I thought this was a decent Polizio Tecci film, although I could have done without some of the nastiness to women. I can't help lowering the tone at this point. Helmut Berger, What a name. I think there was room in Mad Foxes for a beefy helmet burger or two to cover those swinging members. Anyway, stay commando and keep those Stugots swinging. Cheers, Rob at Rob's Lib. Well, thank you very much, Rob. I never got a chance to say this, actually, but he told us what Stugots was, didn't he, Tom?
He did, yeah.
It's basically Italian for bollocks.
we thought it was a typo at the time. It was just a spell check mistake or something, but it actually had a meaning.
Yeah, we didn't know at all, and I think he'd seen it from an episode of The Sopranos. So
okay. There
you go. We don't know anything, but thanks very much, Rob.
Yeah,
I'm glad you enjoyed those. I mean, the Mad Foxes is something to be remembered, isn't it? It's memorable.
Certainly is memorable. Yeah, I'll give it that.
That's what we could give it, and I think we both sort of quite enjoyed Street Killers. For what it was, and old Helmut Berger, he was very good in that.
He was, yes. Do you want cheese on your Helmut Berger? I don't know.
I always want a bit of ketchup and some mustard.
Anyway,
and some mayonnaise. Now, Tom, you have an email there from Mr. Myron Schmidt.
Yes, one half of the Ancient Slumber podcast.
The worst half, some would say.
Chris would say that, the other half. But,
he would, yeah.
He has sent us a little email, and I think this is his first feedback, isn't it? So
it is. Yeah.
Welcome to the Strange and Deadly Show, Myron. Thanks for contributing.
Hello, Myron.
And he says, hello, Mr. Chris and Mr. Tom. You can call me Tom. He says, love the show.
You can call me Mr. Chris.
Since I was launching into feedback this time, I was hoping for a Mad Foxes style movie with clean pressed white karate gis, and what I got instead was one good and, well, one not so good. Oh, which way is it going to go?
White karate gis?
Yeah, your gi, the suit.
I thought it was always pronounced GIs.
Oh, you probably know better than me. I used to just.
I don't know. I know. You've done martial arts though, haven't you? So I assumed that was how it was pronounced. So I don't know. Someone out there tell us.
Oh, we're not very good these days, are we? We're getting all kinds of shit wrong.
No. We should give up.
I really enjoyed the last horror film and really liked Joe and Mama Spinell. Their phone conversations were great and so believable. I loved the effects and pacing of the story. This is exactly what I associate with early 80s slasher flicks, and to use your words, mid-tier. It also didn't hurt that this was in the south of France and boobs were in abundance. Boobs beat floppy cocks all day long and twice on Sundays. Boobs beat floppy cocks. I think
isn't that what some men want?
Yeah, I've got some films about that as well.
Exactly. Well, we all know about you. So, dirty bastard.
The Love Butcher, on the other hand, was a mess. The extreme overacting was at times funny, but also got annoying. This one seemed to go on forever, and I found myself counting cat hairs on the couch cushion next to where I was sitting. The soundtrack, I'm sure, was lifted from some 70s porn flick. This just did not click with me, and I'm glad I don't have to watch it again. Cheers and keep up the good work, Myron. P.S. Excuse my horrible grammar and even worse spelling.
He could not have felt more opposite to us if he tried. Also, I'm quite interested in the fact that he says at the end there, "Excuse my horrible grammar and even worse spelling." He's a writer. He writes for a website where they cover heavy metal music, and you probably want to get that sorted out, really, Myron. That's part of the job.
Yes,
I would have thought.
But completely the opposite to us. But that's fine. That's why we like people writing in. Sometimes the opposing opinions are the most interesting. So we're cool with that. Thank you, Myron.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree, and I can see why the last horror film appeals to him. It's one of those movies I can see why it appeals to people. It just, for whatever reason, just didn't work with us. We're different people, and it just happens that way, really. Just whatever, has a good hook to it in your mind, and we happen to feel completely differently to Mr. Myron there. But very nice to hear from you, Myron.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for writing in, and please continue to do so, because it'd be lovely to hear from you.
Okay, and funnily enough, we've got some feedback from the other half of the Ancient Slumber podcast, Mr. Chris Ward, and it's a piece of audio feedback, so let's have a listen to that.
Why, hello there. Chris Ward here from the Ancient Slumber podcast. Just thought I'd drop you a line, as I haven't done so for so long.
you're actually covering a film I've seen before, which is The Last Horror Film, starring the lovely Caroline Munro and the doesn't look very lovely, but I'm sure he is, Joe Spinell. The two obviously starred together in Maniac, as we all know. They reunited for this quite decent little slasher, actually. Not many films that are set in the Cannes Film Festival, so I suppose it's unique in that way. I'll be honest and say I haven't seen it for a while. I'm going to try and get it rewatched by the time your show goes out. I do have the 88 Films Blu-ray. But yeah, it's from what I remember, it's a enjoyable little film. Joe Spinell's mother's even in it, so that's how committed he was to the part in it. But yeah, it's not as full on as in your face as Maniac, but yeah, it's good for a laugh in it, and any chance to see Caroline Munro in a bit of peril. As for the other film, the Love Butcher, who might be related to Frank Butcher. Pat, Ricky. I'm sorry, I don't know what happened there. I think my brain flipped over or something. Yeah, haven't seen The Love Butcher, so I will get it sorted at some point. Not a lot else to say, really. I just wanted to get a little bit of feedback in before the end of the year. I hope you guys are looking forward to some killer releases coming out next year from the likes of our friends over at Arrow. That deep red set does look fantastic. There's also the Ninja Trilogy is coming out in January on Blu-ray. So I thought that might get you excited, Mr. Clayton. And also 101 Films have been putting out some good ninja stuff as well. Pray for Death's coming next year. So yeah, lots of Sho Kosugi madness, which is wonderful. I shall leave you alone now because I'm just making this up on the fly, as is my way. Myron and I did record an Ancient Slumber podcast for the end of the year to do our end of the year list, but unfortunately we had a few technical demons, and it's pretty much unlistenable. Not through any fault of our own, there really was technical difficulties. It just sounded garbled and jumpy and scratchy and all that other good stuff. So we're going to do it in written form on the blog if you want to find out what we thought of some of the releases this year. So as Mr. Clayton is known for stroking his own ego, I'm going to do mine and say that go over to ancientslumber.wordpress.com and you'll be able to find out some of the releases that Mara and I like this year. But apart from that, I hope everybody has a wonderful holiday and watch lots of films, and we shall all gather again in the new year at some point, I expect, and share our thoughts. So have fun, guys, and I'll speak to you soon. Okay, bye!
So thank you very much, Mr. Chris Ward. Now, he only watched The Last Horror Film. He says this is a decent slasher film, not as full on as Maniac. I agree with that. Yeah. Maniac, I think, much more intensity there, much more tension, really, in my opinion. He did say in there that the Love Butcher might be related to Frank Butcher, and then he did an awful impression of Frank Butcher. He hasn't actually seen The Love Butcher yet, though.
Right.
So he just wanted to get his impression of Frank Butcher in there.
He's been waiting years just for that chance to do his Frank Butcher impersonation. And
he really has. Can I do my impression of Pat Butcher?
Go on.
All right. Roy's my family now, Frank. Talks about some of the releases coming out next year, Tom, including the new Deep Red set from Arrow Video, which I've got pre-ordered.
Me too.
You have as well. I can't wait for that. It's been delayed until it was supposed to come out in November. Then they pushed it to December, and now it's coming out in January. So a bit disappointed, but apparently I received an email from Arrow where they said that they received the grading of the film just wasn't up to par. So they're taking it back to the old drawing board there and getting it sorted out properly, which I'm happy about, because their first release of Deep Red is supposed to be, it is not very good. The picture quality on there wasn't great, so the fact that they're doing it justice, I'm happy to wait for that.
Me too. Plus there was a lot out in November, and it was a bit of a hefty month on the old wallet, so I'm okay with it. After Christmas.
Yeah, me too. He also talks about, now this is, he's aiming this one at me, Tom. He mentions the Ninja Trilogy coming out, and that it would excite me. Yes, it does. I'm a fan of Sho Kosugi and ninja films in general, actually. And there's a company called 101 Films, who I hadn't really heard of until the Black Friday sales happened, and I happened to sort of see that they've got a lot of grindhousey stuff, and they've got a couple of Sho Kosugi ninja films coming out, Pray for Death, and another one that I cannot remember now. But I've got those pre-ordered and ready to come as well. He loves some Sho Kosugi, does Chris, and so do I. Are you familiar with any of that sort of stuff?
You might as well be speaking Chinese, for all I understand of that.
Right, fair enough. He also said there that he and Myron recorded their end-of-year podcast for Ancient Slumber, but had a number of technical issues which rendered it unlistenable. A bit like all the rest of the episodes, Chris. We won't like that. But
podcast war. Let's start a podcast war.
Yeah, I'm firing my cannons, boy. But no, I'm just saying that because he mentioned my ego there, which is a joke. But, you know, you can mess with me, I'll mess with you, Chris. No, but you can go over and they decided to do it in word form instead. So you can read his and Myron's Best of the Year over at ancientslumber.wordpress.com. He said all this in the message, of course, but we're just repeating it. ancientslumber.wordpress.com. And do have a listen to Ancient Slumber. We can hear these two moaning at each other like a married couple and, you know, talking about films that they love.
Yes. It's a good listen. Okay, it wouldn't be the Strange and Deadly show without our old friend Gore Blimey. So he sent us a bit of audio feedback, so let's have a listen to that.
Hi guys, Gore Blimey here. That's Gore Blimey, not Gore Boy. On Twitter as @doubleagent73. I managed to watch the last horror film and made some notes. I won't go into the main story because I know you'll be talking about that in depth anyway, but here are some of the things that caught my interest. The film sets out its stall right at the beginning. We find ourselves watching a film within a film where a pneumatic young woman is electrocuted in a jacuzzi. This scene introduces us to Vinny, and we know immediately that he's a bit creepy, as he's watching the film in a crowded cinema while taking care of a bit of personal business, so to speak. He also likes to completely cover the bedroom wall with photos of Scream Queen Jana Bates, though, to be honest, it might just be an understandable attempt to cover the hideous patterned wallpaper. We even get to meet his mother a few times, and I have to say, she is one of the guilty pleasure highlights for me. She certainly gives one of the most memorable acting performances I've seen in a long time. This is another film that uses Argento-like colour filters occasionally, and I thought it worked okay. I sort of wish they'd done more with it. I also enjoyed the 80s synth pop score, with a few amusing choices of song to go with certain scenes. In fact, the film's an interesting little time capsule in itself. There are mentions of news events from the time and posters for films at the festival that have since become infamous, like Cannibal Holocaust and Possession, that went on to become Video Nasties in the UK. We get dry ice-infused dream sequences, including one with someone on roller skates, and with the catchy sing-along pop music, it sometimes felt like I was watching a version of Xanadu, albeit a gory version where people's heads fall off. Back to the setting, Cannes is shown as a place where women struggle to keep their tops on, audiences scream at movies about eyeball-eating grannies, and when the French locals speak, they make Allo Allo sound like a reality show. In fact, speaking of Allo Allo, I even saw Colonel von Strom in the screening room jury scene. No, really. Playing someone with that same German accent again. Look, I know it's the early 80s and all, but for a big film star, Jana has a really bizarre look. There's the Lily Munster white hair streaks for a start, the blue and hot pink eye makeup clashing horribly with the scarlet lipstick, and a range of outfits in migraine-inducing colours. This climaxes in the award ceremony, where she appears in a metallic shiny number, presumably to give her a bit of oven-ready turkey glamour. Jana makes for an impressive final girl. Not only can she take a bath and a shower in full makeup and come out the other side without even smudging it, but she can run screaming down a crowded street in just a bath towel and somehow keep it from falling off or flapping open. Her ex-husband, Brett Bates, is there as well, and is frequently referred to as Mr. Bates, Mr. Bates. If I was at all rude or immature, I'm sure I'd find that very funny indeed. There are a few scenes I thought were particularly well done. For example, the scene where Vinny starts caressing a projected image of Jana is genuinely creepy, and I thought the axe killing was really effective, despite not putting everything in full view of the camera. And the chainsaw sequence is a great bit of gruesome fun. If I'm honest, I didn't find the film at all scary, and not even very suspenseful, but it had pretty good gore effects, and I didn't mind the twist towards the end. I liked the idea of Vinny increasingly losing his grip on reality throughout the film, and I thought Joe Spinell did a good job of making the character interesting. Despite the acting performances of one or two minor characters and the pace slowing down a bit in the last act, I thought it was an entertaining and fun 80s horror movie. I certainly enjoyed this more than I was expecting to. Anyway, have a great Christmas break, guys, and I'll look forward to your next episodes in the new year.
Alright, that was our old friend, Gore Blimey, not Gore Boy, just in case any of you get confused. I know it's a very confusing world out there, but yes, he mentions that we meet Vinny in a crowded cinema taking care of himself, which is very much how our audience met us back in episode 1.
Absolutely, when we were... what we were doing, wanking off in a cinema, weren't we, Tom? And that's where our love began. No, we actually didn't mention that because to be honest with you, I thought he was doing that at first, and I thought, no, well, he can't be doing that. But yeah, he was masturbating at the beginning to the horror film that was on the screen there.
Yeah, I see. Again, it just doesn't really gel well. I don't know. You know, is he a fucking sex? You know, I don't know. It's just very unfocused. But we've been over that, so anyway.
Yeah, we have. He considered the performance of Joe Spinell's mother a guilty pleasure and there's some very memorable performances in there. I agree. You know, she's not very good, but she's real. And I have to give her credit for that. Once I actually found, because I didn't realise that was his real mother until after I'd watched it, and afterwards it was like, oh, okay, that kind of makes sense, really. And they have a sort of a very strange but kind of likeable chemistry, I think.
Yeah, and she joins the pantheon of great Italian-American mothers that we've had on the Strange and Deadly show, along with Mimi's mother in, what was that film called?
I don't bloody remember either, Tom. We're terrible on this, Em. I can't remember anything.
The Godfather rip-off.
Yeah, the Duke Mitchell's film.
Yeah.
That we can't remember. Just trust us when we say that it's like that.
Yeah.
He liked I didn't think about this, the Argento style colour filters here and there. He wished they were used more. There were some nice colours in there. In some of the moments where he's just on his own in the hotel room, there is a bit of an Argento feel to those. He mentioned the pop songs used throughout the film. A gory. Now this is it. He sort of referred to it as a gory version of Xanadu. Have you ever seen Xanadu?
I haven't, no.
No, you never heard of Xanadu.
I've heard of it. Hasn't it got Olivia Newton-John in it?
Yeah, Olivia Neutron Bomb.
Yeah.
And it's also got Michael Beck in it, who played Swan in The Warriors, the main character in The Warriors.
Okay.
And it was one of those films where Michael Beck was looking like he might be a big leading man, then he starred in Xanadu and it ruined his career, which is unfortunate because I quite like Michael Beck. But yeah, and it's a really bad musical, but it had some music in it that was written by ELO. And I know ELO get the butt of the joke mainly because Alan Partridge always talks about them. I saw ELO in concert, but they and I was saying this, come back on ELO and carry on playing, that sort of thing. But actually ELO quite a good band, and I always remember their song. Have you ever heard that song? Xanadu, dee 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 dee, Xanadu. Now we are here in Xanadu. Wow. Ding ding ding, do 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 do. You ever heard that?
I have not sung with such gusto though, but now I have. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, mate. So he thought Jana Bates had a very strange look for a supposed megastar with strange and monster-like hair and odd makeup. She did look very weird, didn't she? Like, she's supposed to be like pretty much the biggest star on the planet, and I weren't buying it. Thinks that Mr. Bates... Now this is typical of Gore Blimey, isn't it? He thinks that Mr. Bates, if you say it quickly, sounds a bit like Mr. Bates, Mr. Bates, Mr. Bates, Mr. Bates. Are you getting what I'm transmitting, Tom?
I'm kind of getting an inkling of where you're going with that, yeah.
All right, well, that's where he's going with it, Tom. I'm not like that. I'm a clean and respectful individual. He didn't find the film scary or suspenseful, but he liked the gore effects and the final twist. Yeah, I agree, though. I didn't find the film suspenseful at all.
No. And I didn't like the final twist. But everyone's all over the place on this one, aren't they? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Like, you didn't like the final twist, Tom?
Me? No.
Oh, I didn't mind it. I didn't necessarily buy it, but it didn't... I guess you just sort of disliked it more than me.
Yeah, I just thought it was pointless, either have him be the killer or not. It was just part of this whole limbo thing where he's like, well, I'll wank in a cinema and threaten you with a broken bottle, but I won't kill you. I'm not that bad.
So thank you very much, Mr. Gore. Always lovely to hear from you, and we hope we hear from you again in January when we return. Very kind of you. Now, we've got an email here from Amanda, who is become a big fan of ours. In fact, wrote us a message just sort of thanking us for, putting out the last episode. Sometimes when you have a bad day, it's nice to hear a couple of idiots just talking about, movies that probably don't mean that much in the grand scheme of things. But if you can make people laugh and make people smile, it makes it worthwhile, doesn't it, Tom?
It does. And, hearing from people like Amanda, but very positive always, it's always good.
Yeah, very much. It's very a good sort of driving influence and inspiration for us. Well, she says, "Hi guys, finally I was able to watch both movies before you recorded the podcast. Yay! I'm so glad that The Love Butcher knows where it's at, because after I'm done emasculating it with my bottomless body pits and draining it like a sewer in a cesspool, we still know The Love Butcher is the great male Adonis of the universe. The Love Butcher is beautiful, it is love, it is alive." Now, these are all lines from the movie itself. She's not just being overly poetic about a grindhouse style movie. In short, I liked it. It reminded me of a less violent Herschel Gordon Lewis movie, lacking all of the technical prowess a film should have, minus a few interesting flourishes at the end, but making up for it with genuine performances and a lot of heart. Plus, it had a totally groovy look, and it inspired me to buy some records from the door-to-door vinyl salesman next time he comes around. You're into a bit of vinyl, aren't you, Tom?
I am
so
into
that would
vinyl.
be.
I might pop round and try and sell it a bit of vinyl.
You sure this is the way? This is the way in, Tom.
Yeah.
As for the last horror film, we are old friends. Oh dear! I first discovered it on VHS back in the early 90s and thought it's so funny and weird that I started bringing it around to friends' houses, and we all fell in love with Vinnie Durand and his pot-smoking mother. I've got a feeling we're not going to be Amanda's friends anymore after this, Tom. I think this is it for us. I did impressions, usually quoting the lines, "I'm going to Cannes Film Festival, Ma, and eat your baked macaroni," and my friends still liked me. They were good people. Yeah, misjudged though. At the time, I really didn't get the whole postmodern movement behind films, nor did I even know that term. Now, watching it, I realise how strangely self-aware the film is. And although it's definitely a hit-and-miss kind of flick, the way it sort of joyfully plays with the film within a film motif, while also uneasily mixing it with real-life horror such as John Hinckley's obsession with Jodie Foster and assassination attempt of Ronald Reagan, is fascinating. My only frame of reference for Joe Spinell at this point was Maniac, a film I consider one of the all-time greats of the horror genre, and it was interesting to see him here. At times, Vinny is just as sleazy as Frank Zito, writhing around movie screens or on strip club floors, but he's also childlike in other scenes, and although not a wholly perfect performance, it is completely unabashedly Joe and altogether watchable. Don't get me wrong, there's some super silly stuff in there. One of my favourite moments is when the critics are watching Jana Bates get her face burned off and whispering Bravissimo while checking off her name on the Best Actress list. I also love the guerrilla approach they took to capturing footage from an actual Cannes festival, and I love baked macaroni. It's good knowledge to have. Thanks for doing one last episode this year. It feels like a Christmas present. It won't do once you've heard it, Amanda. I'm sending lots of love and light to you and your families. Have a great holiday and a happy new year from Amanda. Yeah, she's very sweet, Amanda, and very, very supportive of us, and is always saying good things about us. Has somehow managed to convince some of the people who follow her. Recently, I've got all sorts of messages popping up. We got one from a writer just the other day. People who've been listening to us and sort of enjoying what we do, Tom.
Yes.
And some of that's come from her. So bizarrely, she's managed to convince people that we're all right.
We appreciate that, Amanda. And we don't agree on this occasion, but the thing is, when you listen to Made for TV Mayhem and stuff, or just listen to it on Twitter, she really knows her stuff, doesn't she? She has got quite a encyclopedic knowledge of horror movies and movies in general. So, although we don't agree on this one, I think she's such an informed person with what she likes and everything. It's, you can't complain really. She likes it, and that's great. We don't, and but she what I'm trying to say is I respect her opinion a lot.
Yeah, they're super knowledgeable and passionate, and we're just two idiots in England. So don't pay attention to us. Well, do, but don't take it too personally. And yeah, it was certainly an interesting watch, that's for sure. And hey, we got something out of The Love Butcher, so it wasn't all a bad thing, was it really, Tom?
No,
it really wasn't. But have a great holiday, Amanda, and thank you very much for writing in. And she's actually said to us before that she will make up more Section 3 films that don't exist just to get us to keep recording after we're done with the list. So You know, clearly she wants us around. We'll still see if that's the case after she hears this. But if so, you know, we'll see how it goes. So thanks, Amanda. We got one final email, haven't we, Tom, from an old buddy.
Our old friend Seth, good old Seth. And he says, hey guys, interesting movies again this time. Who couldn't enjoy Joe Spinell in the last horror film? When he's first seen on screen, he's enjoying the official pastime of the Strange and Deadly show. See, good callback. Yeah. It seems like he was born to play a psychotic yet sympathetic character. You can't help but feel for Vinny. You root for him to achieve his dream and hopefully overcome his demons in the process. I still don't know what to think of the ending of this film. Yeah, I can see what you're saying there. I certainly didn't see it coming. I don't know if you guys appreciated the fantasy sequences, but I did. They were strange, weren't they? You know.
Yeah, I was buying into them initially, but they're sort of unintentionally comical as well.
That's
and
right.
There were a few times I was like, this is a little bit cheesy, but I understood what they were going for.
Yeah. While they're a bit corny, they do give insight into his psyche that mere dialogue could not do. I had heard of this one but never bothered to watch it until now, and I'm glad that I did. For anyone out there who thought that the last horror film and Maniac were the only two movies that Joe and Caroline Munro both star in, then you haven't seen Star Crash from 1978. Additionally, I'd like to recommend the movie Cruising from 1980 that Joe features in. I know that you guys love gritty New York movies. I do too, and Cruising is my favourite gritty New York movie. I think that's an Al Pacino movie, isn't it?
It is, yeah. One I've always heard. I actually hear Mark Commode talk about it quite a lot, and I've never gotten around to seeing it, but it is one I would like to see. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, me too. The Love Butcher is another story. I can't wait to hear the trivia on this one. I'm assuming, like most low-budget films of the era, the guy playing the two lead roles was also the writer, director, producer, etc. I wonder what inspired it. It's a mixture of Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, as well as the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde story for sure. However, my guess is that the films of Herschel Gordon Lewis probably had an impact on it. While many cheap films look alike, this one feels like one of his to me. This one also had an ending that I didn't see coming, but who the hell could have seen that? I'd also like to mention that this movie, as well as Mad Dog Killer from your last episode, both broke the BBFC's rule that a film couldn't feature blood and breasts in the same shot. Just trying to wrap my head around how some of these ended up on the Section 3 list. Finally, I'd like to say Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to Chris, Tom, and all the Strange and Deadly listeners. I'll be looking forward to your eventual return in the new year. Seth. Well, thank you, Seth, and a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to you too.
Absolutely, and he's right though, isn't he? I mean, I guess the last horror film would be more of an obvious candidate for something like the Section 3 list. Maybe even the Video Nasties, but yeah, but the Love Butcher, there's really nothing in there that, you know, would suggest that it would need to be on any kind of list. But then this is why these sorts of lists where you've got films that are basically being censored to some degree, they never make much sense at all. You know, it's just people throwing things in for the sake of it, isn't it?
That's right. And I think it's a testament to how little these people who were trying to control this stuff at the time and say how bad it was, how little they knew about any of it. You know what I mean? There's stuff on this list that's more hardcore than some of the Video Nasties, you know, that were on the Section 2 list. So it's all, you know, they didn't have a clue what they were doing at the time.
No, I bet many of these movies they never even saw. They just looked at the title and thought, oh, the Mad Dog Killer. Well, put that away. You know, the Love Butcher. Oh, we can't, the word butcher. No, we can't have that, you know. And it's, a bit of a shame, really. But there you go. Thank you very much, Seth, for listening. And thank you for your email. That's brilliant to hear from you. Thank you to everybody who wrote in on this one or sent in audio. That means a lot to us. And that's going to be it, guys. That's going to be the end of the show. We've got some stuff to clean up before we go. Of course, if you want to write in feedback to us when we come back in January, we don't exactly know when. If you look at our social media accounts, which we'll give you in a moment, that'll give you some clue of when we're going to be making a return. But we're going to enjoy our Christmas and New Year break. If they want to find us on Twitter, Tom, where can they do that?
We have our dual account, which is @StrangeDeadly, and I am on Twitter as Grindhouse Tom.
And I am at the Gore Boy, and you can also find me on Instagram at the Chris Clayton over there, and you can see me post up a few pictures now and then. So there's some stuff that happened quite recently. I appeared on an episode of Tangential Deviation. Now, I just want to say, first of all, that this is the show that's hosted by Dave Probert from Geek Planet Online. And if you remember on the last episode, he'd written in some feedback about the film The Mad Foxes, and I had said on there, that I was supposed to be on the show, and my schedule hadn't worked out. There were some things that happened in my personal life that prevented me from going on there, and if he ever wanted me, I would be happy to do it. I just wanted to point out that he didn't listen to that and think, oh, I better, ask him as because I feel sorry for him. He actually asked me before we'd even put the episode out. So he'd obviously had been, thinking of it, which is very kind of him. And I appeared on Tangential Deviation. The episode is out now, and basically it's a show, a format where whatever guest he has on, they begin by discussing the subject that they have a very strict 1 hour thing, time slot, and whatever they finish off on the last episode, they carry on with the next guest on the next episode. And we began the episode with a very simple subject: just say no to George Lucas. And it was quite an easy episode to quite an easy subject to start off on, because I'm a passionate Star Wars fan, and we talked about Batman and a few other things, and had a really good chat with him for an hour. So check out Tangential Deviation, and be sure to check out the other episodes on there as well from Dave Probert. Really good fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been on it too, way back when. So back in the archives. Yeah,
they had an original sort of incarnation of it, didn't they? And then he relaunched the format with just him and then a guest. But good fun to do, and I hope you enjoy listening to that. Anything happening in the world of Gentleman's Grindhouse Records, Tom?
Not much, to be honest. I've just been playing Fallout.
I hadn't asked now.
No, but
fair enough.
Brandy and Dave are always putting episodes of the Dark Corner podcast on there, so they had a bit of a break for Thanksgiving and stuff like that, but they're back now, and I have recorded a new Twilight Zone podcast. At the time of recording this, it's not out, but it will be out by the time this one goes out, so it's on there anyway if you want it.
Oh, very nice. Now I have to ask you, I've never asked you this, Tom, do you ever get feedback from people who, because the Twilight Zone podcast is quite family friendly, and intentionally so, and deservedly so for the subject matter. Do you ever get feedback from people who are like, I listened to you on that Strange and Deadly show, your mouth, the mouth on you, Tom Elliott?
It's a funny one, really, isn't it? Because I've always been of the opinion that the tone of the show should fit the subject matter. So the Twilight Zone is a family show, so I wouldn't swear on that. But this is like scuzzy horror films, you know what I mean? Because I've seen, and I'm not commenting on how anyone does their podcast, but I've seen shows where they're talking about a show which is on at before the watershed on normal TV, so it's potentially a family show, and they're like fucking this, fucking that. So and for me personally, when I'm doing something, I like to stick to what I think fits the tone of whatever I'm talking about. So no one's actually brought it up until now.
I wonder if we have a lot of crossover there in terms of.
Some people do. Some people do write to me and stuff and say, "Oh yeah, I listen to the Strange and Deadly show now," and I do wonder whether they think, "Fucking well, there I go again." But I do wonder whether they think, because on the Twilight Zone I am so like, I wouldn't even say shit on that. So it's a good point.
It'd be quite funny if you did one episode where you're like, welcome to the fucking Twilight Zone podcast, but no, you do it very well, my friend. Please do listen to that, because it's a good show, and if you want some good late night listening to the Twilight Zone podcast, because nobody does it better than Tom.
Cheers, buddy.
So that's that. So that's it, guys. That's going to be the end of this episode. Let's tell you about what's coming up in the next episode when we return in the new year. We're carrying on the serial killer themes. What are the films we've got lined up, Tom?
We've got, like you say, 2 more serial killer films. These have a slight link in that they both seem to have an eye aspect to them, like eyes. One is called Blue Eyes of the Broken Doll. That's a lovely Giallo-esque title. And the other is called Headless Eyes. They're both New on me, haven't seen either of them, and that's always a good thing.
Never even heard of them, to be honest, Tom. So this will be. I hope we can find them. It's one of those things. They probably sound so obscure that we might have some difficulty. But that's what it's going to be: the blue eyes of the broken doll and the headless eyes, carrying on the serial killers with an eye fetish. On the New Year episode of the Strange and Deadly Show. Keep an eye on our Twitter accounts, and we'll announce on there when we're coming back. It shouldn't be too long, but we're going to enjoy our time off. In the meantime, if you'd like to leave us a lovely Christmas present and you've not done it so far, leave us a positive review on iTunes. Not a negative one where you call us an egotist and a mumbling bore, but a positive one where you tell us that we're all right and stuff. So that would be great. That would be a lovely Christmas present. And otherwise, Merry Christmas, everybody. Have a wonderful holiday. Have a very happy New Year, and we will see you in 2016 to carry on going through the films on the Section 3 list here on the Strange and Deadly Show. I've been Chris Clayton.
And I'm Tom Elliott, and my very best to you and your families and friends. All the best.
Bye.
Bye.
So, Tom, this is an obscure little number, one that you and I have seen for the very first time. What did you think of the Ludge? The Ludge?
The Ludge Budget.
What did you think of the Ludge Budget? Let me start that again. Put it in the bloopers.
Oh, Ludge. I lodged it. I really did lodge it.
You lodged a long time. All right. So, Tom. Okay, you laughing in the background.
Sorry, okay. I've got it together now. Go on.
All right.